Now that your husband is gone, grieve, pack your bags, and never come back." Those words sliced through the dinner table like a blade. My daughter-in-law Romy said them without a tremor. My son Wade, the boy I raised, the man I thought I knew, simply nodded and murmured, "She's right, Mom. The house was never really yours anyway." If you've ever sat in a room where the air itself seemed to turn against you, you'll understand why I need to tell this story. My name is Myrtle. I'm 71 years old, and tonight I became a stranger in the home I built over 3 decades of my life. The mahogany dining table stretched long and hollow between us. I kept staring at Noel's empty chair, my husband's place, waiting for his steady presence to break the silence. It had been only 7 days since I stood over his grave, clutching cold roses, whispering to the earth that half my soul had been buried with him. Now, a week later, his absence had turned into permission for them to erase me too. Romy's voice had always carried a chill, but tonight it was arctic. "Pass the potatoes," she said sharply earlier, and her words carried the authority of someone who had already measured the rooms, already called the movers. Wade sat beside her, his eyes fixed on his plate as if my grief were too bright to look at. This was the same boy who once clung to my skirt during thunderstorms, trembling, asking me to stay with him until he fell asleep. Tonight, he couldn't meet my eyes. "I've managed this house for 32 years, I said, steady, because steadiness was the only armor I had left. "I know every creak in the floorboards and every faucet that needs coaxing. This isn't too much for me." "That's exactly the problem," Romy replied smoothly, her smile practiced but her eyes cold. "You're not getting younger, Myrtle. A house this size isn't practical for you anymore. Think of the bills, the maintenance, the risks." I turned to Wade. My voice cracked, but I forced the words out. "Your father and I saved for years to buy this place. Every room holds pieces of our life. It's our history. Your childhood. How can you say it's too much?" "Memories don't pay taxes, Mom," Romy cut in, her fork clinking against porcelain like punctuation marks. "Be practical. A senior community would be better. Activities, people your age. You'll thank us." The mask dropped in that moment. I saw it clearly. This wasn't concern. This was calculation. Romy had spent 15 years rearranging Wade's loyalty, brick by brick. She had told him Sunday dinners with me were too stressful, that holidays had to be fair, which always meant her family got more. And now, with Noel gone, she didn't even bother with the pretense. "Do you really think I should sell this house?" I asked Wade quietly. "The home your father and I built, where we celebrated every birthday, every Christmas, where we—" "It makes sense, Mom," he interrupted, his eyes still down. "And honestly, Romy and I could use the space. We're thinking of expanding our family. This house has potential. Potential, a word used for properties, not people. A word that stripped away 3 decades of love, sweat, laughter, and turned it into square footage on a blueprint." Then Romy leaned in, her voice cold and deliberate, each word chosen like a weapon. "Now that Noel is dead, grieve, pack your bags, and never come back. The house was never really yours." I looked at Wade, begging silently for the son I once knew to appear. For the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, calling them golden roses. For the young man who cried on my shoulder after his first heartbreak. For a flicker of the child who belonged to me. But all I saw was indifference. Worse than anger. Indifference is final. "I see," I whispered. The room swayed, but I forced my legs to carry me upstairs, one heavy step after another. My bedroom door closed behind me with the softest click, yet it sounded like a verdict. Inside, Noel's cologne still lingered in the air. His reading glasses rested on the nightstand, arms spread as if waiting for his hands to pick them up again. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my reflection in the dresser mirror. A woman with silver hair and eyes dulled by shock looked back at me, older than 71, older than grief itself. 2 weeks, Romy had said, not 2 months, not even the mercy of a season, just 14 days to dismantle a lifetime. I pressed my hand to the nightstand, grounding myself. Noel had always managed the finances, but he made sure I learned. He said once, "Myrtle, pay attention. Someday you might need to know everything I know." At the time, I waved it off, laughing. But he insisted. And because of that, because of his stubborn love, I knew where the papers were. Downstairs, I heard Romy's voice on the phone, brisk, efficient, confirming contractors. 2 weeks from today. I sat very still, letting the rage burn slow and quiet inside me. Grief was heavy, but beneath it I felt something harder forming, a determination Noel would have recognized. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I would go to the bank. I would call the lawyer if needed. I would find out exactly what Noel left and who had any right to claim it. Because if they thought they could erase me, they had miscalculated. That night, I brewed tea and stood by the kitchen window, looking out at the lake you can only see when the trees are bare. The December wind rattled the siding, the same sound it made every winter Noel and I laughed about drafts we never quite sealed. I sipped the tea, steadying my breath. Love and money. Two words circling like hawks. My marriage had been about love. Tonight, my son and his wife had made it about money. But tomorrow, I did not sleep that night. I lay awake in Noel's side of the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the groan of the old baseboard heater. Every sound carried weight now, like the house itself was whispering its memories back to me. By dawn, I had already decided. If my son and his wife believed they could write me out of my own life, they had underestimated how much I had endured to stay standing. This wasn't the first time I had been treated as expendable. It was simply the latest chapter. I remember the early years with Wade, before Romy, before the ambition and money reshaped him. We were not rich, not even comfortable most days. Noel and I counted pennies in the grocery aisle, deciding between real butter and margarine, between brand name cereal and the store brand in the plain box. But there was joy tucked into those lean years. We built this house from nothing but overtime paychecks and secondhand furniture. I painted the nursery walls myself, pale yellow because we didn't know yet whether Wade would be a boy or girl. Noel built the crib out of oak planks, every joint sanded smooth. When Wade was born, I thought our sacrifices had finally become blessings, but blessings have a way of being forgotten by those who benefit most. I still see it clearly, Wade's 16th birthday. I saved for months to buy him a used truck, the kind every boy in our town dreamed of. It was old, dented, but reliable. He barely looked at me when I handed him the keys. He was already too busy checking his phone, waiting for Romy to call. I told myself it was normal, that boys pull away, that mothers must learn to let go. But deep down, I felt something cold settle in me, like the first crack in winter ice. Years passed, and the small cracks widened. Wade stopped coming home for Sunday dinners, claiming exams, then jobs, then business trips. When he did appear, it was Romy who spoke for both of them. She commented on the table settings, suggested the casserole was too heavy, reminded me of new diet trends. Wade sat beside her, nodding, always nodding. I kept cooking his favorites anyway: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, chocolate pie, dishes he once begged for as a boy. But he pushed them aside, choosing her salads and sparkling water. I told myself it was fine, as long as he was happy. Mothers learn to swallow disappointment like dry bread. The first real betrayal came the year Noel had back surgery. He was laid up for weeks, and I cared for him day and night. Wade and Romy visited once, bringing flowers and a card. They stayed for less than an hour. Romy glanced at her watch twice, said they had another engagement. Noel tried to smile through his pain, telling me not to be angry, but when the door closed, I saw his face crumble. He never said it aloud, but he felt it too, the distance, the coldness. That night, I sat in the dark living room, listening to his uneven breathing, and realized we had been quietly replaced in Wade's world. Still, I endured. That is what wives and mothers do, isn't it? We endure. I took extra shifts at the library, balanced bills, clipped coupons, and made sure Wade never saw the worry lines on my forehead. I skipped new shoes so he could have football cleats. I made do with canned soup so he could have fresh sandwiches at school. He thanked me when he was little. As he grew older, the thanks disappeared, replaced by expectations. Sacrifice once noticed became invisible. The memory that stings most came on my 65th birthday. I planned a small dinner, just family, just us. I baked a cake from scratch, decorated it with the same pale yellow frosting I used for his childhood birthdays. I set the table with Noel's best china. At 6 o'clock, the house was silent. At 7, still nothing. By 8, Noel and I ate in silence, pretending not to notice the untouched plates. Later that night, I saw the photos online. Wade and Romy on vacation, glasses raised, smiling wide. The caption read, "Family time is the best time." Family time, without me. That was the moment I truly understood. I had been erased in plain sight. So when Romy looked me in the eye last night and said I should pack my bags, I was not surprised. Hurt, yes. Wounded in ways words cannot fully describe. But not surprised. It was simply the loudest echo of something I had felt for years. This morning, I walked into the kitchen with resolve hardening in my chest. The sun barely skimmed the horizon, casting pale light through the curtains. I made coffee, strong and black, and opened the drawer where Noel and I kept the documents. There they were, neatly labeled folders, contracts, receipts, the mortgage papers stamped "paid" in thick red ink. I traced his handwriting, firm and steady, on the cover sheets. He had prepared me for this moment without knowing it. I slipped the papers into my tote bag, my hands calm, my breath even. Upstairs, I heard Wade moving, Romy's voice drifting like smoke, sharp, dismissive, already planning. I did not linger. I pulled on my coat, the wool one Noel insisted I keep, and stepped into the cold morning air. The frost bit my cheeks, but it steadied me. Today was not about grief. Today was about truth. As I drove to the bank, memories pressed in from every corner of my mind, the sacrifices unnoticed, the dinners left cold, the birthdays ignored, the quiet humiliations endured. They did not crush me. They sharpened me. Each slight, each wound had become steel inside my bones. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to strength. This is why I'm telling you my story. Because love can be taken for granted, erased, or dismissed. But truth, when revealed, does not ask for permission. And when Wade and Romy face the truth of what Noah left, they will learn that the woman they thought they could discard still holds the keys to everything they covet. By the time I stepped into the bank, my hands no longer trembled. I carried Noel's folders like a shield. The branch manager, Mrs. Patterson, greeted me with that same coral lipstick she had worn for decades. Her expression softened as soon as she saw me. "Myrtle, I'm so sorry for your loss." I nodded once. There was no time for condolences. "I need to understand our accounts. Everything. Now." She led me into a small office with glass walls. The poinsettia in the corner had wilted, its leaves curling in on themselves like tired fists. I placed the stack of documents on her desk, each file labeled in Noel's careful handwriting. She tapped into her computer, frowning, typing again. "Some of these accounts show unusual transfers," she said finally, her tone cautious. "Large withdrawals over the past year. Did you authorize these?" The room tilted for a second. "No," I said. "Every bill was paid from our joint checking. There should be no large withdrawals. Mrs. Patterson clicked, scrolled, then printed a sheet. She slid it across the desk. My eyes froze on the numbers. Tens of thousands moved out in regular intervals, all to an account listed under Wade's name. My son, my only son. I felt my throat close, but my voice came steady. "When did this begin?" "About 14 months ago," she replied softly. "Always around the first of the month. Significant amounts. The system shows his authorization." I remembered Romy's smug tone the night before. "The house was never really yours." Now the arrogance made sense. They weren't planning to take from me. They already had. I gathered the papers, thanked Mrs. Patterson, and walked out into the brittle December air. The truth weighed heavier than grief, but it was a weight I could carry. When I returned home, Wade and Romy were in the living room. She perched on the couch like a queen, scrolling through her phone. He looked uneasy, his leg bouncing. I placed the bank statements on the coffee table between them. "Explain this." Wade's eyes flicked to the papers, then to Romy. She didn't flinch. Instead, she smirked. "We've been helping you, managing your money so you don't make mistakes. Older people, they forget things. We were just protecting the family assets." Protecting. The word tasted like ash. "You took money that wasn't yours," I said. "Without permission, without even telling me." Wade cleared his throat. "It was for the best, Mom. You don't understand finances the way we do. We've been investing, growing the funds. Someday you'll thank us." My gaze burned into him. "Do you know what I gave up so you could have opportunities? The meals I skipped? The nights I stayed awake balancing bills? And now you sit there and tell me theft is for my own good?" Romy leaned back, crossing her arms. "Don't dramatize. We're family. Family shares." The silence stretched so long that even Wade seemed to squirm. I rose slowly, gathering the documents. "You may have taken what you thought was yours, but Noel prepared me. Every asset, every deed, every mortgage paid in full, he left me the keys. Not you. And tomorrow, the lawyer will make that clear. Romy's composure cracked for the first time. Her eyes narrowed, sharp and calculating. Don't be foolish, Myrtle. Courts favor the young. They'll see you as fragile, incapable, Fusnant. You'll lose more than you realize. I studied her face, calm as stone. The mistake you made was assuming fragility means weakness, but I have endured more storms than you could survive, and I am not done yet. Wade finally spoke, his voice tight. Mom, please, let's not turn this into a war. I turned toward the staircase, papers clutched in my hand. It already is. That night, I spread every document across my bed. Deeds with Noel's signature, accounts in my name, the mortgage stamped paid in crimson ink. Proof, all of it. For hours, I studied each page, marking, highlighting, building my own fortress of truth. At midnight, I tucked the files into a fireproof box Noel had insisted we buy years ago. For emergencies, he said then. He must have known somehow that this day would come. The next morning, I drove to the law office. Mr. Callahan, Noel's old attorney, greeted me kindly. I expected you, he said, as if Noel had whispered to him from the grave. I showed him the transfers, the statements, the deeds. He studied them, his brow tightening. They've left a trail, he said. If this goes to court, there is no defense for them. These funds belong to you. Relief mixed with fury in my chest. I had not imagined it. I had not been blind. My trust had been betrayed in the coldest, clearest way. As I left his office, clutching the assurance that I was not powerless, I felt something shift inside me. Grief had been my companion for 7 days. Now anger walked beside it, steady and controlled. When I returned home, Romy met me at the door, her smile stretched thin. Well? She asked. I brushed past her, my voice low but unshaken. You will find out soon enough. Upstairs, I closed the door to my room and let the silence wrap around me. They thought they had already won, but they had only revealed their hand too soon. Tomorrow, with truth as my weapon, I would begin the real battle. And for the first time in years, I did not feel like the weakest person in the room. I felt like someone who had finally remembered her own strength. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. Romy had arranged a family dinner that Sunday, insisting on hosting it at my house as if the deed had already changed hands. I said nothing, letting her believe she still controlled the stage. By 6 o'clock, the dining room was set, candles lit, dishes steaming on the table. Wade sat stiffly at the head where Noel once presided, while Romy floated from seat to seat, greeting relatives with a smile too wide to be genuine. I sat at the far end, my papers tucked neatly into a leather folder at my side. As plates clattered and conversations swelled, Romy raised her glass. To family, she declared, her voice clear and commanding. To moving forward, to new beginnings. She glanced at me, her eyes glittering with triumph. I lifted my own glass, but said nothing. Instead, I placed the folder on the table with deliberate calm and unlatched it. The snap of metal echoed louder than her toast. I think, I said evenly, it's time we discuss what has really been happening. The chatter died instantly. Forks hovered midair, eyes turned toward me. Romy's smile faltered. Wade shifted in his chair. Slowly, I spread the papers across the polished wood. Bank statements, property deeds, the mortgage stamped paid in bold red ink. I let each page speak louder than my voice ever could. These, I began, tapping the statements, show tens of thousands withdrawn from my accounts over the past year, withdrawn not by me, but by Wade. A murmur rippled through the room. Wade's face reddened. Romy opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. Not yet. I slid another document forward. This, I continued, is the deed to this house, paid in full by Noel and me. Every cent accounted for. No lien, no mortgage, which means the claim that this home was never mine is a lie. Romy laughed, brittle and sharp. Really, Myrtle, do you expect anyone to believe you? You're confused, overwhelmed with grief. We've been managing things for you because you can't keep up. Her words hung heavy, but I did not flinch. Instead, I looked straight at Wade. Did you tell her that's what I am? Confused? Helpless? His lips parted, but no sound came. The silence stretched until it broke under the weight of truth. I leaned back, my voice steady as stone. I went to the bank. I went to the lawyer. Every document is in my name. Every account traced. And if you think age makes me blind, remember who taught you to balance a checkbook. Remember who sat up nights teaching you math at the kitchen table. The relatives whispered now, their eyes darting between Wade and Romy. Someone muttered, Unbelievable. Another shook his head. The walls themselves seemed to lean in, listening. Wade finally spoke, his voice a low rasp. Mom, we were just trying to help. Help? My tone was sharper now, cutting through the air. Help is sitting by your father's bed when he could barely breathe. Help is carrying groceries when my back ached. Help is making sure birthdays are remembered and tables are full. Help is not stealing from the woman who gave you everything she had. Romy's composure snapped. You're selfish, she hissed. An old woman clinging to the past. You should be grateful we've handled things. Do you think anyone here believes you're capable of managing all this? I stood then, not with anger but with resolve. Let them decide, I said quietly. I picked up the deeds and held them high enough for every eye to see. This house, these accounts, every last document proves where the truth lies. I do not need to scream or beg. The truth stands on its own. The room was silent except for the crackle of the fireplace. My relatives stared at the papers as if they were sacred texts, undeniable and final. Romy paled. Wade buried his face in his hands. The power she had flaunted all evening drained away, leaving her small, cornered. I endured silence for years, I continued. I endured being forgotten, dismissed, replaced. I endured sacrifices that went unnoticed. But tonight I will not endure lies. Not in this house, not at this table. Someone at the far end whispered, Good for you, Myrtle. Others nodded, murmurs of agreement spreading like ripples in water. For the first time in years, the room tilted in my favor. I gathered the papers slowly, stacking them with care. The lawyer will file what needs to be filed tomorrow. Until then, understand this. I am not leaving. Not this house, not this life, not my own dignity. If you thought you could erase me, you have already failed. With that, I sat down again, folding my napkin neatly across my lap. The silence remained, but it was no longer heavy against me. It pressed against them, against Romy's brittle arrogance, against Wade's crumbling excuses. I let the quiet do the work words no longer needed to do. Dinner continued, but the laughter was gone. Conversations shrank to whispers. Plates clinked without appetite. Across the table, Romy's hands trembled against her wine glass. Wade's eyes stayed fixed on the tablecloth, unable to meet mine. I ate slowly, deliberately, as Noelle would have done. Each bite was an act of defiance. Each sip of water a reminder that I still belonged here. They could not take that from me. Not with lies, not with greed, not with betrayal disguised as concern. By the time the candles burned low, it was clear the power had shifted. They knew it. I knew it. And though the night ended without further words, the battle line had been drawn in ink and stone. The truth was no longer hidden. It stood at the table with me, unshakable. The fallout began the very next morning. Wade tried to knock on my bedroom door before leaving for work, his voice low and desperate. Mom, please, let's just talk this through. You don't need to involve lawyers. I stayed seated at my desk, the stack of documents spread neatly before me, my pen still moving across a yellow legal pad. I did not open the door. Some words do not need repeating once the truth has been spoken aloud. By midday, my phone rang with Mr. Callahan's number. Everything is filed, he said. You are the sole owner of the property and accounts. Their withdrawals will be investigated as unauthorized. If they press further, they'll be facing charges. His voice was calm, but beneath it, I heard the steel. Justice, slow but certain, had begun to move. That evening, Romy returned from the grocery store, her arms full of bags, her face flushed with anger. She dropped everything onto the counter and glared at me across the kitchen. Do you realize what you've done? You've humiliated Wade in front of the whole family. They're all talking, calling him a thief. You made him look weak. I closed the ledger I had been reviewing and looked at her steadily. He made himself look weak. He chose lies over honesty. He chose greed over gratitude. Her lips curled. Do you think anyone's going to side with you? You're just an old widow clinging to a house too big for you. Wade has a future. He has responsibilities. People understand that. I stood slowly, each movement deliberate. You're right about one thing. Wade does have a future. But what you fail to see, Romy, is that it no longer depends on me. And when the truth reaches places you can't control, people will see exactly who orchestrated this. For the first time, her confidence faltered. She turned away, slamming cabinet doors, but I saw her hands tremble. The days that followed were like a storm unraveling in slow motion. Relatives who once hovered around Wade and Romy began to distance themselves. Invitations dwindled. Phone calls ended quickly. Neighbors who had smiled politely now avoided eye contact in the grocery aisle. Rumors spread faster than fire in dry grass. They stole from her, people whispered. She showed the proof at dinner. Wade grew quieter with each passing day. He stopped trying to defend Romy's schemes and instead sank deeper into silence, his shoulders sagging beneath the weight of shame. I caught him once in the driveway, staring at the truck I had bought him years ago, his face pale with something between regret and fear. He looked at me then, eyes wet, but said nothing. There are no easy words for betrayal. Romy, however, fought back with venom. She called her parents, trying to rally support, but even they refused to interfere. She accused me of ruining her marriage, of turning Wade against her, of clinging to a house that should have been theirs. But every accusation rang hollow now. The documents in my possession were louder than her words. The final blow came when the bank froze the account she had been siphoning from. She stormed into the kitchen, waving a notice. They froze it. Do you understand? We can't pay the mortgage, the car loan, nothing. You've ruined us. I looked up from my tea, my voice calm. No, Romy. You ruined yourself the moment you thought you could take what was never yours. She shouted, cursed, threw the paper onto the counter, but I remained still. Anger had burned hot in me once, but now it was cold, steady, like ice that never melts. That week, Wade moved into the guest room. I heard the arguments at night, muffled through the walls. Romy accusing him of weakness, Wade telling her to stop, both of them unraveling. By Friday, he appeared at my door, eyes hollow. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. I should have stopped it before it went this far. I studied his face, the boy I once cradled, the man who had chosen silence over loyalty. You let it happen, I said, and now you live with it. Apologies don't erase truth. He lowered his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. For a fleeting moment, I almost reached out to hold him. But I didn't. Some lessons can only be carried, not softened. The family dinner the following Sunday was different. This time, I set the table alone. Only a handful of relatives came, those who had always seen through Romy's charm. The air was lighter, conversation warmer. Noel's absence still ached like a missing limb, but for the first time, I did not feel like a ghost in my own home. I felt present, solid. Halfway through the meal, Romy arrived uninvited. Her eyes were wild, her voice sharp. You think you've won, don't you? Sitting here like some queen, but you'll be alone in this house, alone with your papers. Wade won't forgive you, and when I leave, he'll leave too. I set down my fork and looked at her, unblinking. Then leave. Take your threats with you. This house does not need them. The room fell silent as she stormed out, her heels striking hard against the tile. Wade did not follow. He sat frozen, staring into his plate. The silence told me everything. By the time dessert was served, the tension had broken. Laughter returned, soft but genuine. I felt Noel in the quiet joy of it, as if he were reminding me that storms always pass, leaving clarity behind. That night, as I washed the dishes, I realized Romy had already lost the war. Not because of me, but because of herself. Her greed had stripped away the facade she wore, leaving nothing but desperation. Wade had paid the price too, his name stained, his pride broken. The very things they thought would elevate them had become the chains dragging them down. And me? I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Not the fragile peace of silence endured, but the strong, steady peace of truth revealed. I had not needed to fight with fists or fury. I had only needed to stand firm, to let the truth speak louder than betrayal. The house grew quieter after Romy left. Her absence was like a window finally opened in a room that had been sealed too long, the air fresher, the shadows less heavy. Wade stayed, moving slowly through the halls like a man carrying weights he could no longer put down. He avoided my eyes, but the silence between us was louder than words. Every night, I heard him pacing the guest room, and every morning, he left earlier than before, as if work could erase the shame that clung to him. One afternoon, I found him in the garage staring at the old oak crib Noel had built decades ago. Dust had settled on it, but the wood was still strong. His hand rested on the rail, his shoulders trembling. I remember this, he whispered. You painted the walls yellow to match. Dad stayed up half the night sanding the edges so I wouldn't get splinters. His voice cracked. And for the first time in years, I saw the boy he used to be. But memory alone doesn't undo betrayal. I stood in the doorway, my voice steady. Memories are only as strong as the choices that follow them, Wade. You let her convince you to take from me. You stood by when she humiliated me. That's what I will remember most. He didn't argue. He simply lowered his head and walked past me, his shadow long in the afternoon light. Some wounds are too deep for quick forgiveness. They require years, if they ever heal at all. Neighbors began to knock on my door again, carrying casseroles, loaves of bread, jars of homemade jam. Their eyes were kind, their words careful, but I could feel the unspoken judgment they held for Wade and Romy. They asked how I was managing. I told them the truth. I'm stronger than they expected. And I was. Each day that passed, I felt more certain, more rooted, as if the house itself had chosen to stand with me. The lawyer called again. The withdrawals Romy orchestrated would be flagged as fraud. If she pressed further, the consequences would be severe. I chose not to push the matter, not yet. Sometimes the weight of public shame is heavier than any courtroom verdict. Romy had already lost her standing in the family, her respect among neighbors, and the future she imagined built on stolen money. That was punishment enough. Wade lingered, torn between the life he had built with her and the truth he could no longer deny. One evening, he came to the kitchen as I was washing dishes. "She left," he said simply, "took her things, took the car, and left. I don't know if she's coming back." I dried my hands and looked at him. "That's her choice. But your choices remain yours, Wade. Don't confuse the two." His eyes filled with tears, but I did not reach out this time. Lessons written in betrayal cannot be erased by comfort. They have to be faced in silence. Weeks passed, and slowly the house began to feel like mine again. Not just the walls and windows, but the spirit of it. I polished Noel's old tools, tended the garden he loved, made soup the way he preferred, with too much thyme. I set one place at the table instead of two, but the loneliness no longer broke me. It simply reminded me of what I had survived. The lesson carved into me was sharp but undeniable. Love built on respect will endure any hardship, but love poisoned by greed will always collapse. Romy learned it too late. Wade is still learning. And me? I have lived long enough to understand that dignity is worth more than any inheritance, any possession, any house. Dignity is the one thing no one can steal unless you hand it to them. As I sit by the window now, watching the winter sun sink low over the lake, I know this. I will not spend my remaining years begging for recognition from those who could not see me when I stood right in front of them. I will not cling to people who choose betrayal over loyalty. I will live in peace because I have earned it. If you have ever felt discarded by the very people who should have protected you, know this: you are not powerless. The truth, when you hold it firmly, is stronger than any lie. And sometimes, the greatest justice is not in fighting, but in standing tall, letting the storm rage, and watching as those who tried to destroy you fall apart on their own. I tell my story not just for myself, but for anyone who has ever been silenced at their own table. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, if you've ever needed a voice that says you are not alone, then stay with me. Subscribe so that these truths, hard, sharp, but real, can keep reaching those who need to hear them most. Because in the end, family may betray, money may vanish, but dignity spoken aloud will always remain.